Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Cabarrus County Schools Board of Education regularly scheduled work session tonight for Monday, October the 7th, 2013. Thank all of you for being here. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And the first item on our agenda tonight is an observance and a moment of silence. As all of you know, most of you know, that we had a tragedy here within the last week or so on one of our students was tragically killed in an automobile accident, and a couple other juniors were injured in this accident, and I surely hope that they're doing well. And but I'd like to ask everyone in attendance to join me in a moment of silence in remembrance of Miss Caitlin Ziegler. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. The first thing on our agenda tonight is setting the agenda, and we've had this since last Wednesday, I believe. And do I have a motion that we accept the agenda as it's presented?
So moved.
Mr. Harrison makes the motion. Mr. Kiger seconds the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion's carried and the agenda is set. The first item tonight is the report section, and this will be Ms. Klutz coming to the podium to talk with us about the QSCB financial status. And you know, as you'll relatively see real quickly, that we're winding down, and so she won't be there long unless you have tons of questions, which I don't think so. Thank you, Ms. Klutz.
Thank you. Good afternoon. You're correct. I'm just going to entertain any questions that you have. Absolutely.
Well,
I tell you what, before we answer the question, I will make a comment since we had a subcommittee meeting and this list came up, and just for information purposes to our other board members, Mr. Whitkey and Mr. Burnett said, hey, we're getting real close to being able to define what we want to do with the funds that are left. So that's coming. They just wanted to wait just a little bit longer to see how some of these shook out to make sure there wasn't, we didn't run into a snag. So just for information purposes, that's coming for us to decide what the balance left, what we want to do with it.
any other comments from the board? Mr. Phillips or Mr. Harrison?
Mr. Kiger, does that also include the contingency for open projects if those amounts are not spent, or just the balance remaining
It will be
column?
anything that's unencumbered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Any other comments from the board? I will mention to you, Ms. Klutz, since I didn't see you at the commissioners' meeting, it was asked of us what the expected amount would be left over. And I think Dave said somewhere in the range of maybe 55,000 total. And for the sake of the board members, can you tell us if that's somewhere close? And that's contingency and amounts that are unencumbered.
The amount that we have in the far right column, the balance remaining, is what we have as unencumbered right now. So the amount that Mr. Burnett mentioned is a little bit larger than that. So I guess he's anticipating a small amount of the contingency being freed up so that you would have that available to you, would be my estimation.
So it could be just a little bit more than 55,000 or less.
No, we have only approximately 13,000 available in the remaining balance column.
Right.
So Mr. Burnett is clearly anticipating some of the funds that we have obligated being able to free up.
Well,
So between 13 and 50.
Well, that's a good rod range. I'm sure we can find something to do with it. Y'all be working on, some suggestions for us at some point in the future.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Klutz, for clarification on that. And then the next item is the QSCB milestones, and I guess Mr. Whitkey will do that. Well,
Mr. Burnett.
Mr. Burnett and Lynn's. We called on him a while ago at the commissioners' meeting. He wasn't nowhere around. So, but anyway, Dave's here. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome. And this report is as of mid-September. Central Cabarrus High School, really there hasn't been movement on that as we're continuing to work with the attorneys. We're looking really at the final payment on the contractor, and we're deducting any expenses that the school system has encountered. as we completed the punch list. Northwest Cabarrus High School, that project is substantially complete. We are really in the punch list phase on that, and we are awaiting closeout documentation from the contractor. Mount Pleasant High School boiler replacement, at the time of this report, the boilers were on site. I can fast forward to today that the boilers are in place, and that really what they were waiting on was the flue to be delivered, and that project is in really good shape, and we really don't anticipate any issues on that project. And we do have some contingencies on that project that we're expecting to free up, as Ms. Klutz had indicated. Concord High School, weight room vocational building, that building is dried in. It's looking really good. That one was a big question mark because it hit really during the height of the rains, that we couldn't get the site work done, and we just had to wait. But we're at the point now where we were forecasting maybe something around maybe November, 1st of November or something like that. But now that the weather has improved a great deal, we're hoping that it'll be before we think it'll be this month of October. One odd item that's going to come off is the breaker panels. That's 100% complete, so next month's report has that removed. And the Jay and Freeze Middle School, that hasn't changed yet. The contractor is anticipating starting very soon, and that they have 90 days to complete that work, and that was, I believe, as of September 17th or so was when the clock started on that. It's mid to early September, and the contractor doesn't anticipate any issues meeting that requirement. And that is the current projects on the milestone.
Thank you, Dave. Board members, do you have any comments or questions about the milestone report? Start on Mr. Shoemaker's side.
My speaker's not working. Okay, that one works. Dave, on the roof replacement at Jay and Freeze, do you anticipate that the contractor will be complete with the work in around Thanksgiving?
That's reasonable.
Because that's
obviously, number one, they need to start. Number two, the weather, needs to cooperate. But it's very reasonable for them to be complete by Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Ms. Carpenter, you have any comments?
No.
Mr. Geiger?
No.
Okay. Mr. Walter? Mr. Harrison? Mr. Phillips?
Was there anything significant on the punch list for the Northwest High School gym project? Or I guess I'd put it, what is the most significant thing on the punch list? That way you could just...
And really, we'd have to get an update as to how far along they are as far as completing it. As far as the punch list, there was nothing on that looked like there was any kind of conflict or any discussion or debate about whether that was in the scope or not. It was all very clean, and that the punch list actually wasn't bad compared to many projects.
Well, that's a good sign, because I believe that contractor has been given a new contract to work elsewhere in the system.
They are working on Concord High School gym, and they're also the contractor awarded the J.M. Robinson High School field house.
Okay, so at least one down, two to go, and that's good. Well, I hope that the administration at Northwest High School will arrange a formal ceremony where we can celebrate the completion of this big project.
I'm sure they'd be happy to, and we can talk with them.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. And also wanted to mention, Dave, while you're at the podium, as we were at the commissioners meeting earlier, the question came up again by the chairperson of the commission, and that was the excess funds for the QSAB projects. Wanted to remind us that we have to have that money spent by April 2014. So I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of it and remind Ms. Klutz and you guys that, for design and bid and all the different things that's involved in getting anything done these days, we're going to make sure we need to get this money somehow, even though I know that, for example, the roof, and there is a contingency there, at J and Freeze, but still yet, though, we need to really start working on some of these items that we can fit in that meet the J and Freeze, the QSAB criteria. And not everything that we do will meet the criteria since it's federal money. So I just wanted to remind you and your staff to make sure that y'all don't forget that we got a deadline on that. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you so very much. And that
You're
takes care of the report section. And the next items of discussion these are items that we will be voting on, either go to consent or action agenda on our business meeting next Monday. And the first item is the policy and policy revisions of the first reading. And we'll have those and also a second reading. And Dr. Louder's here to do both of those. We'll do 5.1 first, and then we'll move on to 5.2.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I believe that the first read policies are pretty simple. I'll try to summarize those quickly and then see if you guys have any questions. The first four policies, 4125, 4150, 4353, and 4362, are all simply changing the wording to 20 school days, which I believe Mr. Walter suggested at one or other to try to be consistent. So we did a search and pulled those out so we would have a 20 school day consistent length of time. So I think that's an easy one. Web page development 3227 and 7322 is a one-line change to, right now it says that the principal will monitor every link that a teacher wants to have to an outside web page. And what we found and certainly heard back from the principals was that was virtually impossible to do for every link. All other policies in other areas cover us as far as advertising and some other links we have there. So we just want to take that out and say that may not be feasibly possible, but it's certainly something that we monitor. And attendance is essentially a one-line change. Right now the policy says that a parent can write a note for someone to be sick. So in other words, you have a stomach ache, my child was sick yesterday, and that's an excused absence. And what we want to change that to is after they do that 10 times. So after a student has missed 2 weeks of school because they were sick or had a stomachache that they didn't see a doctor for, that starting on number 11, that they would have a doctor's note for that. And that's something also that truancy court, which has begun in Cabarrus County, would like to see for consistency. So that way, we're just saying on absence 11, you're asked for a doctor's note. So I think those are simple changes, but I will certainly take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Dr. Louder. Board members, you have any questions, starting on Mr. Phillips' side?
I don't have any problems with any of the proposed changes, but on policy 4353, which is the long-term suspension policy, I was a little concerned by the section D, and I just wanted to get the feeling of the rest of the board on whether it's appropriate or not. The final sentence is what I have a problem with. Thus, the board encourages school administrators to find ways to reduce suspension and expulsion rates in the schools. We all like to see that happen, but I also don't want administrators to feel that there is any sort of an edict that they are going to be, judged negatively if they have high suspension or expulsion rates. If the student population requires them to have that, then those students should not be in the schools disrupting the classes of everyone else. And so I really feel kind of strongly that we shouldn't be putting all the emphasis on, get those rates down, because I feel that sometimes that may cause an administrator to make a judgment call on one of the side that keeps a disruptive child in the classroom.
I'll have to agree with Mr. or Dr. Phillips's close reading of that. It does kind of beg the question, or kind of contradict, I don't mean contradict, but seems to say something opposite than what the rest of the policy seems to try to lay out. So it possibly could be considered.
Also, Dr. Louder, there was something, I can't remember what it was. It seems like it's been some time ago where there was, I don't know if it came from the School Board Association or where it came from, and that they were wanting us to find ways to keep kids in school, and I don't know how that ties in with this.
Yeah, I think, in my mind, the qualifier is the sentence before. The board also recognizes excessive use of suspension and expulsion may have a negative impact on academic achievement and graduation rates. Thus, we encourage you to find ways to reduce that. So, of course, as Mr. Phillips said, that's something you're encouraged. There's obviously not a mandate there, and we want people to be able to run their schools, and obviously safety and having a productive environment is the most important thing. But if that's a sentence you want us to take out, we can certainly do that.
Well, my suggestion is just to get rid of Section D altogether, because it's not really talking about, everything else talks about the procedures of what you go through in the event of a suspension, and this last, Section D is just basically a comment, and so I would just suggest getting rid of it.
And I think Mr. Harrison would say he agreed. If y'all just want us to take Section D out, we can do that.
And Ms. Carpenter also is on the policy committee. She may prefer to weigh in at some point. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. May I continue?
I apologize. I need some help from Ms. Probst with my computer. It's temporarily lost its mind or something, and so I've been trying to get back.
I take it that's
Technological
an okay
difficulties.
for me to continue talking.
Go ahead.
I'll keep it slow. How's that? Take up more than my usual few minutes. What I greatly admire and appreciate about the McKinney-Vento policy is that there are children in our system for whom this policy directly applies. These are real flesh and blood individuals who have these circumstances and conditions that confront them. And while I certainly understand that it's mandated and partially funded and all that, and we're getting smaller size van type buses or smaller buses to facilitate the transportation of kids in these circumstances, the policy, and I want the staff to know this and I want the community to know it, this policy, it restores and it attempts to establish stability in a child's life. And the school system does a marvelous job, at least of attempting to have that influence in the most chaotic situations that confront children that fall into this category. So I admire us for having this, and I hope we apply the McKinney-Vento policy well and efficiently all of the time. And I commend the staff who follow this policy very closely. Anything else I have are just minor little typo things. And that's it for me. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Walter, you have any comments or questions about the policy revision?
Let me look at my notes. I don't have any issues with the first three. I think it was the... I had some comments on the attendance policy, which was what, 4,400? And just give me a second as I'm looking through the notes here. I think there's a part that says generally in this let me find the paragraph. And I wish I would have referenced it when I wrote it down.
Well, I can speak just for a minute while you're
Yeah,
looking.
just if you can come
Yeah,
back to me, that'd be.
yeah.
that'd be helpful.
Page 2, right in the middle, absences due to extended illnesses or after accumulating more than 10 minutes generally require a statement from a physician.
I don't think generally needs to be put in a policy. Either it is or it isn't. That would be.
You know, there are some times, and I guess when I can give you an example of why that statement would come up.
Okay.
Which is essentially a student is is having neurological problems. They've been to see a neurologist. They're having seizures, and they saw them on the second week of school. Well, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, 6 weeks later, whenever they come at school and essentially say, come to school and essentially say, he was out yesterday, he had a seizure, we're not going to necessarily require a doctor's note in that incident because we have enough medical documentation, even though it may be the 11th absence. I don't know if that maybe makes sense, but that was part of the discussion we had there and why you put generally in, because it's not set in stone, but it's 99% of the time.
It seems like it could create some more problems for us, but, and the other comment was, there was a minor typo. On page 3, you crossed out the word 90. You didn't need to do that. And should we reference anything about the new truancy court that we have in the county in this policy?
I would say no, it's not really school board policy, and ultimately if our district attorney and our district judge decided they wanted to remove it, it's still against whether we do it in truancy court or outside of truancy court, the law stays the same. So I would not recommend that we put that in the policy.
Okay. Those were my comments on those policies, first 3 policies.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walter. Mr. Kiger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any comments on the revisions made. I will have, on 3227, I just couldn't find the red. I couldn't find what we were doing differently. And I figured if I couldn't find it, it must be pretty insignificant, and I wasn't going to worry about it.
It's one strikeout on page 4, the 4th line down. Links to external sites, including externally hosted teacher classroom sites, must be approved by the principal, and we're just taking that out.
Oh, it's not red. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just a strikeout.
I saw that. I just didn't see any red.
That's
okay.
the only change.
That's fine. Go back to 4353, that section D that Mr. Phillips referenced. He makes a good point. It is kind of a commentary. At the very end, it seems a little, once you have that notion and you read it, it seems a little out of place. So I'm okay either if we decide to scrap it, that's okay. If we want the committee to look at it and talk to Sarah or Mark while they're, outside this, an actual board meeting to discuss it a little bit further and then, bring us a recommendation, I'm okay with that too. Either one you want to do is fine with me. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Kiger. So looks to me like that, let's see what Carolyn and Barry have to say, and then we'll just go from there.
Okay.
Ms. Carpenter, you have any comments on these?
Well, one thing that I hadn't noticed, and we were talking about these, it says the following 10 elements. If you count down, we got more than 10 elements there. We've got, if you count down, there's more than 10 elements.
Which policy?
The one that we're referring to with that D, 4353.
Oh.
There's more than 10 elements there. If you count down, there's actually, keeping that D in, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
That's not the D he's talking about. That's a different D.
Oh, that's a different D?
Yeah. If you go all the way to the end.
Oh, well, but still, it says 10 elements. If you look at that section that says the following 10 elements, on number 2, where it says notice to student parents, it says, down the very following, it says the following 10 elements. And then it's got A, B, C, D. There's more than 10 elements there. If you're going to say 10 elements, then you better make sure you got 10 elements, because you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It looked like it was more than 10. Or am I wrong? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Or
Ms.
did
Carpenter,
I count wrong?
Ms. Carpenter, where are you at? I'm trying to figure out where you're at. I think the rest of the board,
Spirit tells me
I
I
think the
know where
rest of
I'm
the board's
at.
trying to figure where you're at.
Wait a minute,
We can't
maybe I
figure out
counted
where
wrong.
your
Wait a minute,
elements
maybe
are.
I lost myself.
4350, page 4.
Okay,
number
wait a
2.
minute, wait a minute. Maybe I was looking at something different.
Notice to
Because
student
I was looking at that D, and you were looking at another D, so maybe I was, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You're right. Okay, never mind. All right, so there was another D that you were looking for.
It's the capital D at the very end. Go to the very end.
Oh, okay, so I was looking, because I kept looking at that. All right, never mind.
Thank
All
you.
right, because I was looking, which D were you looking at?
Scroll all the way to the end.
Okay, because that other D didn't make sense. Okay,
Capital right there, right here.
okay,
That's what he's talking about.
all right. Because that other one, I thought, well, we needed that other D in there. I thought we did, okay. All right, with that one. I would rather let the attorney look at that one before we actually leave that whole paragraph myself. Because we hadn't talked about that before we deleted that. Okay, that's my only comment. Never mind about that.
We'll put that
one. I did.
strikeout on the next committee meeting, and we'll discuss that
Okay,
as a group.
Yeah, I'd rather get him to look at that.
All right, well, that settles that one then. So that will automatically go to the action agenda, so that's no problem on that.
Okay.
So, but we still want to hear Mr. Shoemaker's comments, though.
On that, on the suspension expulsion rates in 4353 that we're just, Ms. Carpenter was just talking about, we have some rates that we have of our own, and we do some comparisons to other rates around the state and, and averages like that. And I think that would be our benchmark as to whether we're too high or too low, as long as we're in the ballpark with other systems our size. I think that's really what we should be monitoring against.
That comes
Don't
out every
necessarily
year.
see that D would necessarily make any difference as long as we're doing some comparisons and making sure that we're well calibrated with the rest of the
And
state.
those comparisons come out every year in February, so in March, we'll get the crime and violence report, and it will have those compared on a per 100 basis.
That's what I thought I remembered something like that.
Yes.
Could I make one comment? For the individuals that are not aware of, one thing I would, and we just kind of briefly touched on it, and I would like just to make our whole board aware if they're not, and we have just recently started our new truancy court, and we can thank Sue Burns. She was very active in making that happen, and the teen court and the actual JCPC. Well, everybody joined in, but I think that's really going to help our school system and help our dropout rate, but I think that's really going to be a real asset to this community. And I don't know how many of our board members were aware of that truancy court that has started, but I think that's something we can really be proud of, and I think that's going to be a real asset to our whole community.
I think you're right, Ms. Carpenter, no doubt. Mr. Shoemaker, you had a additional comment?
Not so much about the policies, but just to mirror on what Mr. Harrison was talking about on the homeless policy that we have. A lot of folks in the viewing audience probably have come across children that have gone into these situations, and my hat is off to our employees here, the professionals that handle this, because this takes a tremendous amount of energy, a tremendous amount of time to track down, to work with these children, to work with their families, and try to police. And police is really the wrong word, but trying to keep up with where they're moving and where they get relocated to. My wife and I have a personal experience in this arena, and I know how much energy it took for us just to get this family settled. And I can't imagine what we go, because we're close to 300 of these types of situations throughout the county. And so anything we can do to streamline the process to help these families, I'm all about, and would love to participate in any way we can to make it better for them. But this is a very valuable policy, I think, and restores the humanness to the child.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker, for your comments. And my only comments, Dr. Launer, would make sure that when you bring these back on the second reading, that we have the revision dates for October 2013 or whenever we do it. I noticed a couple of them was missing the revision. I think one of them had May of 2012 in it or something. So it's just an omission, no big deal. But you guys can check that.
Okay.
So I guess everybody's okay with this going to the action agenda for next week, since we do have Carolyn's concerns and, Mr. Phillips' concerns. So everybody okay with action?
And-
Ms. Stone?
Just one item?
Just the one item, right.
Okay,
Just-
yeah, I was going to say, I'm
Yeah,
fine
the
with
rest can go
everything else.
consent, as far as I'm concerned. Is that Is that okay with you guys? Okay, so it'll all be going to consent except for the one action item, 4353.
That may be what Sarah's going to say.
Chairman Chu,
Yes.
at your pleasure, I can address 4353 right now if it would be helpful so that we can go ahead and move that
If
to
that would suit
consent
Ms.
if the
Carpenter, that
parties.
would be certainly fine with me, 'cause
Consistent,
I'm
okay. I believe the intent of that section D at the end of 4353 is to mirror the message the General Assembly communicated in this section of the Student Discipline Code regarding an intent, a real push by the state for us to try to minimize the use of long-term suspensions except in the most serious circumstances. And one way, and I'm sure Dr. Louder could give you more numbers on this, that we've been able to do that here in Cabarrus is through our increased use of an alternative education services at the Opportunity School at the Glenn Center. And so I believe that section there really is a policy intent that is trying to mimic what this general statutes are saying in terms of seeing if there are ways for us to ensure that we're not long-term suspending students for infractions such as tardies and things like that, but only using it in significant situations and trying to use alternative schools and so forth to allow these students to continue their education.
Ms. Stone, I couldn't have said that better myself, but you said exactly what I was trying to think of, but I knew that we had discussions on that in times past. Ms. Carpenter, does that satisfy your concerns?
That's fine.
And-
So you're thinking we need to keep it in there?
I think we don't have to have, it's not a requirement for us to have that language in there under the state statute, but the state statute itself does urge school boards to have policies which try to minimize the use of long-term suspensions. And so I think this paragraph is one way that we can try to communicate to the public and to our administrators that we need to think about what our disciplinary consequences look like and what are our options to use. And obviously in certain circumstances, long-term suspension or expulsion is appropriate, but in other circumstances, perhaps we can use something like the alternative program or another resource to try to keep these children in school and continue their education.
Exactly. In other words, in layman's terms, that's attorney's terms, layman's terms, we didn't want to send no kids on vacation, in other words. Send them somewhere. They had to go to an alternative school or something where they could continue their education. So I hope that helps a little bit. Does everybody else got any more concerns? Is everybody okay now to go instead of action?
I'd like to hear what Mr. Phillips
Yeah.
has to say.
I'm
Okay, I understand the motivation for it. Maybe we could just add something in that final thing, is find ways to reduce suspension and expulsion rates in schools, such as the use of the alternative programs, something like that, just so it's not a case of, so I keep my rates down, I'm not going to discipline this child. I don't want that message to be interpreted by anyone that's in a
And
position
we'll
of
work on a way to
being a
change that
principal.
last sentence to incorporate what you said and bring that back for second read.
Okay, so we can move on to the action agenda the consent agenda for that item then, for all of those policies. Everybody good? Okay, so I'll mark my action out and we'll put consent there. And Dr. Louder, if you want to continue on with policy readings on the second reading, we can do that at this time.
Second reading, there are 3, and I do want to just say, with all the laws that were changed in Raleigh this summer, we just got our first School Board Association update. There are 34 different policies that are needed to be changed from the laws that we had changed this summer, which is quite a few. And we'll talk about how to prioritize those and what the best way to bring those to you guys over the next few months is and how to group them together. One of those was graduation requirements, which we actually had on last meeting for Winkler. I know some people had some questions prior to that meeting, but I think we got them answered. And I don't think we had a discussion. You were good with those. The changes that were made since then, we thought let's try to get those on now so it'll be one less policy you guys have to bring up. They're pretty simple changes, I think, but let me try to tell you and see if you have a question. One adds a new section addressing diploma endorsements, so you can get an endorsement in a certain area. One adds a new footnote related to occupational course of study, which basically just says their internship hours, they can actually be paid while they're doing those. Pretty simple change, benefit to the student. And then it updates legal references, which is required, that you can't get past that. So I think those are very minimal changes that as long as you guys are good with, we'll put that through and we'll only have 33 policies that have to come before you instead of 34.
Okay, board members, you have any questions on 3460?
Yeah, well, I've got one question
Okay,
on
Mr.
that. On number 2, where it says beginning in 2014-15 school year, successful completion of a CPR instruction. And that's going to be a requirement for all students. What if they're not physically capable of doing that?
That's state law. It was part of the General Assembly. I know Dr. Van Hukelum had a plan to start working on that with middle school students, and they've started. I do not know what the exceptions to that are, but I would assume it's pretty standard that, what's that?
Same as anyone with
Yeah.
disability.
If somebody has a disability and couldn't do it, then it's not something that's
So is there
required.
some reference to that if they've got a disability in this policy that's,
It's not a need because it falls under the Disabilities Act, which is a separate policy, so it's only under IEP.
okay, well, it's trumped somewhere as it was said.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Are there any other questions on this side before I move to this other side? Good. Hey, Mr. Geiger, you had a question?
Well, it's kind of a comment. I'm fine with what we have laid out, and this may be more of a question for Jason, but I've always found it curious that if we take AP chemistry, you have to take honors chemistry first, and then you go to AP chemistry, and it's like that really has never made much sense to me. But in reading this, if you take AP history, we scrap the two histories that come before it. It's the only course we don't do the same thing we're doing with the other ones, and I just am curious of why that's the case, or why we don't go ahead and do either the American History 1 or the American History 2 to precede that AP U.S. history. Why do we do that one differently?
All right. So the AP American History 1 and 2 are new courses that are just coming online. We'll start American History 1 next year, American History 2 the year after. The state guideline is that if a student takes AP U.S. History, that it will cover both of them because of the content within those courses. So if you look at the content of AP U.S. History, it will cover the entire breadth of American History 1 and 2. So when you look at content alignment, it can satisfy that requirement. Whereas AP Chemistry is built on what students would learn in honors chemistry. So really you have to get into the curriculum, into the content to determine whether it overlaps or whether it's built on.
Okay, so it's truly like a prerequisite.
Exactly,
Whereas the AP,
yeah.
it encompasses everything we're doing anyway.
Correct.
So we give them an option
Yeah.
to take two other social
Exactly,
studies. Okay,
yeah.
that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Geiger. Ms. Carpenter, you have any questions, concerns? Mr. Shoemaker? Okay, well, board members, everybody okay? Mr. Harrison, you had something?
Just a tiny suggestion. This policy seems to have the same link to the ncpublicschools.org curriculum graduation several times. Maybe just one time would be sufficient. But it seems to be in there multiple times. For the sake of this policy, maybe it should just be in the first paragraph or the first page somehow.
Yeah, I think that the reason that there is, it depends on what they're looking for. So it actually, it takes you to a general link, and there are multiple choices on that general link, if that makes sense. So that's why it's there. It's a different link on the same page, if
All
that makes
called
sense.
graduation.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
I beg your pardon. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harrison. Any other questions on 3460? Okay, everybody okay for consent on that? Okay, Dr. Louder, if you want to do the 4135.
Yes, sir. Again, simple change, one change, the tuition waiver for students who are paying tuition to attend our schools, that a waiver could be submitted in writing to the superintendent. That's the change.
Any comments, questions? Everybody okay with consent agenda? Okay, we'll go consent on that item, 4135. And the last one here of the second reading policies is policy number 5030, and we'll cover that one.
Community use of facilities. I do want to say a few things about that, and then we'll try to answer your questions. This policy came up for discussion actually about a year ago. It started last fall. It's been back to the policy committee at least 4 times that I'm aware of, twice while I've been doing this. It is a very important policy, and it is a policy that, as far as I know, one that we've spent more time on than anyone I'm aware of. I think when it started at that point, there were some negotiations with the county. Donna Smith was involved with that. I know Kelly Klutz was involved with that. I think Mr. Tyson was involved with that. So there's been a lot of stakeholders involved for a lot of reasons. We brought this back and was taken back to the policy committee for the second time since this summer. And we spent an hour on this policy each time that we discussed it, and ultimately came up with the recommendation that we have now. We do have 3 principals that are on that committee, an elementary, a middle, and a high now that started participating. All 3 of them believe this is the way to go as far as the people on the ground that are working with these groups feel like this is the way that we should word it. The finances and how that would be charged is something that Ms. Klutz has worked on, and she's very comfortable with where we're at now in that position. So I understand that it may be a policy that it may not be a unanimous policy, but I would say very respectfully that it probably needs to be voted on and moved forward, because if we don't move it forward, it will not be able to be passed by January 1, where we have something saying starting January 1. I think Mr. Walter may have first brought up to say, hey, we need to give these people some notice that we're going to change. If we don't move it forward, then I don't think that we'll have enough time to be able to let them know. So I would just kind of respectfully request that that we vote, or at least try to move that forward. Or if you guys voted no and we did not pass it, then we'll take it back and start all over.
Thank you, Dr. Louder, and I can only ditto pretty much what you said. You know, we need to decide and move on, as I've said before, and talked to some of the board members. You know, it's been kicked around by greater minds than mine, that's for sure. And I think that, you know, there's not much more, if anything, can be done to this policy. But if it's the board's election to send it back to committee, well, we can do that, as we have in the past. But I do think, though, my recommendation, along with Dr. Louder's, is that we move right along with this policy. And just because we move along with it now doesn't mean that it doesn't come back to us at some point in the future. But for the time being, though, we do need to move on, though, I think. So I'd like to hear from the board. And like I say, I've talked to the board individually about some of their concerns. I know Mr. Walter's concerns, Mr. Phillips's concerns. And but as for myself, I have some concerns as well. But I would not have my concerns in front of moving forward. And so with that being said, I'd like to give the board an opportunity to say what they say, and then let the board decide whether they want to go to the action agenda to talk about it some more, or just move on to consent agenda and vote on it and move forward. So we'll start on Mr. Shoemaker's side, and if you have comments or questions, we'll do that at this time.
Well, I like what you've put together at this point. I don't have a lot of concerns about the way this policy has been executed at this time. I do have a question, though, on number 2, when it talks about local governments which have executed a memorandum of understanding. This is more of a process question. What happens to memorandums of understanding? Are they maintained in a book where we can get to them? Where we, if we say, or do we have a memorandum, or do we have to go dig through all of our minutes and notes to find out where these memorandums are? What is y'all's process for handling those types of?
I think the latest process of is the memorandum of understanding or contract, whichever one you would call that, if it involves some type of finance, that Ms. Klutz holds those because it has financial implications. Even if they don't, then she's the holder of the agreements.
So you have a binder, because a memorandum of understanding brings something different to my mind. A memorandum of understanding is something that just carries on and on and on, and it's a way you've negotiated to carry on business from here on out. Whereas you're talking about a contract and a lease, that's not a memorandum of understanding in my mind. That's why I'm thinking there's a little bit of a difference in the way you're interpreting it, or at least you're interpreting it to me. So, Ms. Klutz, if you have something to add.
The previous board had requested that I keep a database of memorandum of understandings or contracts, anything there like. So I have an electronic database that we keep all of those type items in.
So you have a database of all, but you call them contracts and memorandums of understanding. So.
Any of those types of things that I can get my hands on, the cabinet knows that those are my responsibility to keep those contracts, and any legal agreements, I keep those.
Then this becomes kind of fuzzy, because you're saying local governments which have executed a memorandum of understanding. I hate to be picking, but if they enter into a contract, it's the same thing as a memorandum of understanding in the world that you're maintaining documents in. So could they have a contract instead of a memorandum of understanding? Because you've been very specific to use the term memorandum of understanding. And that's a very specific term in the world that I came from. So that's why I'm really just being such a...
If I may, we refer to it as a memorandum of understanding in this policy because as it stands right now, we have one umbrella MOU with Cabarrus County. That was negotiated, entered into last year, and it was characterized as an MOU rather than a contract because it really is a friendly agreement between the school board and the county in terms of trying to work together and share facilities and manage how facilities are used across the entire county. And so that's why here it was referred to as an MOU because it's referring to what currently is a very specific document with a specific governmental entity. And it would be my recommendation, should one of the towns come to us or another entity, that we'd enter into a similar type friendly agreement with them and characterize it as an MOU. If that answers your question. I know it's a bit circular.
All right, so what you're saying is if Concord, for instance, at the Glenn Center, where we have these fields down there, and we could use them, but they're going to, I've offered them for sale to them, we would have an MOU that we could still, as Cabarrus County, use those fields even though, but you're saying that all future negotiations with other governmental entities would be termed an MOU, and that's why this is in there.
Agreements that are similar to what we currently have in place with Cabarrus County and specifically its Parks and Rec Department, in which there's a sharing of facilities and different ways that they're organized and collaborated on.
And one other point, each individual town, they fall, for active living and recreation, they fall under that original one memorandum of understanding. We don't have separate ones with all the little towns. It's one document that goes through the active living and parks department at the county level, and our agreement is at the county level for use. So the Glenn Center fields would fall under that. The gym at Mount Pleasant Middle would fall under that. The gym at Patriots Elementary would fall under that. For all of that parks and active living and recreation use for youth athletics. Yep.
And one little comment from my point of view also, since the funding for all this comes from the county, I think that's why we have the memorandum of understanding versus a contract, because they're the one that gives us the money to start with. And so, it's not like we're going to give you the money, but you got to let us use for whatever we want. That's not the case at all, because the property are owned by the Board of Education, but they're funded by the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners. And so that, I think, Ms. Stone, you'd probably agree, that's one of the primary factors, that it's a memorandum of understanding versus a contract. So anyway.
And that's the thing, I was hearing the words contract, and I wanted to be clear on memorandum of understanding because you're specific here, and contracts are not specific except in other parts of it. So, thank you.
I think we're good, no problem. Ms. Carpenter, you have any comments?
Well, one of the things I wanted to make sure, as being on the policy committee, as we stated, we've gone over this many, many times, and the last go-around, we wanted to make sure that we were being fair to all of the organizations. And we put back in, again, for the youth organizations, making sure that we put back in the 50% discount. We wanted to make sure that we heard it from many sources that was very vital to make sure that we did make it available to those youth organizations at that discount, because we want to encourage the youth to utilize the fields and make it affordable to them, because there were going to be many groups that if we didn't, they were not going to be able to afford it. And some people say, well, gee, if with that discount, is that going to be fair? And some were afraid that maybe some of the tournaments that would be, they were going to get a big discount. But that's not the case. If tournaments come in, there's a different fee structure for that. And so that's a different fee schedule. So without everything taken into consideration, this was the best thing we felt would be good, because there were certain groups that were youth that had not maybe paid before, and they would have to pay. So this was going to be the best thing possible for them. And we looked at every scenario. We took the blackboard out, put figures on there, and we really worked through this scenario many different ways. And we looked at many different areas, looking at the little team that had 10 players that were really not what you would say a nonprofit, but they were a youth organization. We looked at the ones that were maybe a youth organization and a nonprofit. We looked at a youth organization that was a dance studio. We looked at all kinds of things. So this, after a long discussion, we felt this is the best thing.
Let me ask you a question, Ms. Carpenter, since you are on the policy committee there, and this was one of the concerns that I had, and I think Dr. Phillips shares that same concern, and we'll be getting to him in just a little bit. And when you're looking at all of the options, and Dr. Louder as well, when you're looking at all the options for how to make that fee structure work with the discount for the youth organizations, how did you come up with, what did you decide to do with, say charter schools, for example? A charter school, which in all honesty, they're in direct competition with Cabarrus County schools. They get the same funding as Cabarrus County schools, but yet they don't have to provide athletics. They don't have to provide child nutrition. They don't have to provide transportation, but yet they get the same funding. And since they do have youth organizations and they are under age 21, do we let them use our facilities at 50% where it actually costs us money? Because we actually, Ms. Klutz could probably entertain this better. I think that it probably cost us more than the 50% that we would get for a youth organization that would be such as charter schools, private schools, or anything like that would want to use our facilities. To me, it don't seem quite fair to give an advantage to your competition at the expense of Cabarrus County schools. That's just my thoughts on it. There's 6 more of these board members.
It was something that Dr. Phillips certainly sent, and we spent a long time on. The 2 board members can certainly speak up about that discussion, and it's a great point. That's why we spent so long on it. And I think the summary of that discussion was to say, if that even those groups that we may be in competition with, there still would be serving a large portion of our students. And so those 3 principals very unanimously said, this is something that, because this could be a situation that would go wrong, we would not want to take away the ability of a guy to take 10 guys out on our field and have a baseball team. That's the best thing for our community. And while it's not perfect and it may not be perfect, I think Ms. Klutz was very comfortable saying the way we set up the fee structure is going to be okay for the schools. They're not going to lose money on that. We feel fine with it. And at the end kind of said there is this open-ended question out there that if that was to become something we felt like we're being taken advantage of, we'll bring it back and change the policy. But the stakeholders in the room did not feel like it was a substantial risk at this point compared with what we would lose if we didn't work with those groups that are serving our students and serving our community. Not always directly with us, but it's something that we want to keep and encourage them to do. And while that situation makes us a little nervous, not nervous enough to shut down that community portion that serves our school so well.
And I agree. That's a very good explanation, Dr. Louder. And then another point, Dr. Phillips and I were talking today about this. Those parents are taxpayers in Cabarrus County as well, most of them. And so they should have access to some facilities just because they go to a charter school. But the unfairness is the part that I was trying to bring to light, with our facilities, because they get the same funding, as I said, and but yet they don't have to do this. So they're going to get the funding to get to use our fields at our expense. But if Ms. Klutz is comfortable that we're not going to lose money to do that, the ultimate purpose is to serve the children in Cabarrus County and, the residents of Cabarrus County, which after all, it all belongs to them anyway. It's Cabarrus County property. And so any way we can serve them is fine with me. So, Ms. Carpenter, thanks for your involvement in that and all the hard work you put into it. But that's all that I have, and I hated to jump in line, but I wanted to bring that to light since you are on the committee.
And that, as Chris said, that his explanation was great because, as you mentioned, they are everyone's a citizen of this county, and as you mentioned, they are taxpayers, and those children, no matter where they are, they have been, their parents are taxpayers, and they've paid their taxes, and those taxes have helped build those facilities. So they've helped pay for them, and we did check with Kelly to make sure that whatever that fee schedule was, it was going to help pay for the maintenance of whatever was done. And of course, we are going to get the first dibs, our teams and everything. And one of the things that I want to commend Chris and Sue both on, and David, I have to give him kudos because it was David's idea. He brought it up to start with, is to make sure we had representation of all the principals at elementary, high school, and the middle schools on our policy committees. And we have bought those on our policy committees. So when we do have decisions like this, besides of what our policy committees were before, now we've got representation of those people on our policy committees now. So when we do have these decisions that have to be made, we've got those individuals, somebody representing on our policy committees now, someone from that, and they rotate too, so we get different individuals when they can come. So
I'm glad that we have all the participation, because I believe more heads is better than one or two heads, and so I'm all in favor of that, and I think we're okay. Mr. Coger, you have any comments or questions?
Just something very briefly. I guess I agree with Dr. Louder. It's kind of time to move it forward. And one, this is just something, somewhere down the road, we are going to have to re-look at this. And what my fear is, we rightfully are giving school groups first use of the facilities. That's what we should be doing. But what I'm nervous about is, 10 years ago, we would not have dreamed that we'd be leasing a field to a travel lacrosse team. And they're using it. They did a lot of work out there to our benefit, but we didn't see that coming. Well, there's going to be groups. They're going to form. They're going to be school-related. They're going to want to get into the gyms either later than they're currently getting in or on Saturdays. And they're school groups, and they're going to be first. And I don't know recently, but the last time I was involved with it, we were about 95% capacity on gym space for youth basketball. And that's starting at 8 o'clock in the morning and going to 5 or 6 at night. Well, all of a sudden, if you had 2 or 3 hours that now the school group wants to get in on Saturday and they've got first dibs, we're going to be scrambling around at some point in time. And we just don't have the facilities that. And I'm just nervous about that. That doesn't really have anything to do with what we're doing here and what we're going to vote on. So I apologize for taking time away from what we're actually doing. But somewhere down the road, it's going to come up. The school use agreement, the memorandum of understanding, the school groups that have first priority, and how we're going to juggle all that. I may not be here, or none of us may be here when that time comes. But it's coming, and hopefully Donna's here because she'll have a good handle on how to take care of that for us.
Well, all I can say about that is we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, won't we, Donna? Mr. Walter, do you have any comments, questions? I know we talked about this also.
Yeah, I'd like to see it on the action agenda if that's, but, there have been some improvements. I do appreciate that you've addressed several of the issues that I brought up a couple months ago or whenever we had it the last time. The one big thing that's still missing for my comfort level is under the fee structure. I mean, essentially, we're raising the fees for the folks that are currently using this thing, and I think the board needs approval of that. It's great that we come up and we determine what these fees are, but I think those fees ought to come before the board like all these other fees that we approve to other groups. But that being said, I like the way you've addressed, remove the reference down here in section H. I think that's more effective for this. The notice is important. But just general thoughts on it. I'm still uncomfortable. I think it's a very confusing policy. I mean, for the general public to come in here and look at this and try to read this and try to figure this out, It's confusing for us up here trying to figure this out. I think it's even more confusing for the general public to try to read this policy and figure out what's what and who applies to what. I would imagine Scouts are a youth organization. Would that?
Yes.
But something like the Carolina Eagles football team, what is that? You know, would love to use our facilities. I think what they're using Webfield now, but that's a group a community group that's a benefit. Handling the local groups versus out of town folks that put on tournaments and are going for a profit. The fields. If somebody's running a field, does that mean that they can come in and set up concessions and all that other stuff that comes with that? It just seems a lot of things it's a confusing document for me, and I'm uncomfortable with. I don't want it to appear discriminatory that we're favoring one group or another. If this is our school, community schools, and it's. So that's where I'm at with it. It's improved, but I'm still not really in favor of the policy the way it's written.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. So, since you have asked it to be on the action agenda, we can do that. That's no problem. And that means we'll get to vote. You can vote yea or nay, whatever your choice is. But just, since you were talking about maybe the board voting possibly on the fee structure, that type thing, Ms. Klutz, how often do you think that you will be changing these fees? Is this going to be something that you're going to have to address annually? Or, obviously, if Duke Power raises the rates 10%, then our costs go up. So do you have to counter-react?
The fee structure should be adjusted annually. It should be adjusted for any time employees get a raise, the benefits along with the employees that get a raise, and also in addition, as you mentioned, the electric rates and those types of things, because we're trying to cover our costs. So anytime our costs are increased, the fee structure should also be increased.
So basically what you're saying is then you'll review this annually then?
It should be reviewed annually. So it has not been reviewed annually because we've not gotten pay increases and those kinds of things. So we try to do it every other year or as often as we can or as it is necessary. But it should be done annually at least.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Klutz. Okay, Mr. Walter, you have any questions? Mr. Harrison?
Ms. Carpenter knows me too well, and she's already brought in my corny joke that I use, but the principals who were brought into the policy committee have really added a lot from my comfort level, because I see them as the kind of the implementers of policies like this and probably many, many other policies. The rubber hits the road with them actually applying the policy, and there were two principals in the policy committee as we discussed this matter a few weeks ago, and I point blank asked them, can you work with this? Can you make this happen? And they unequivocally said yes. As it is stated, they can work with it. Now, that doesn't mean that in conjunction with the annual review of the fees, it possibly would be wise to also coordinate a review of the policy so the two tick and tie and are coordinated with each other. And I hope we'll consider that at the right time. I would feel comfortable 6 months, a year from now, discussing the fees and this policy kind of as a pair, if that's possible. But I feel good about the policy, and those principals did as well in terms of their actively being able to work with this policy as it's stated. I hope the board feels good about that.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. And Mr. Phillips?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that I'm the one, it's kind of ironic that I'm the one playing the miser on this panel, but I'm going to play the miser on this panel. Y'all, there is no such thing as a free lunch, or in this case, a lunch with a 50% discount. I know every one of you cares deeply about children or you wouldn't be on this board, but the fact of the matter is this school district does not have enough money to be subsidizing the use of our facilities by other organizations. we don't spend enough money right now to maintain our facilities to withstand the use that they have from our own operations, much less bringing in outside groups to wear them out even more. And until we set fees that cover the cost of the use of these facilities, we're going to be taking away and opportunities for our own kids. Excuse me. Got a tickle in my throat. So, and I'm especially appalled that we're going to give a subsidized rate to for-profit organizations that because we struck out nonprofit youth organizations, and it's just youth organizations. I spent Saturday morning working with a bunch of volunteers doing fix-up projects around one of our schools because we spend $2 million less than we should each year on maintaining our facilities. So we were power washing the sides of buildings to remove mildew and raking up leaves that we don't have the money to have a yard crew rake up and putting in mulch and everything else. And that's just what volunteers do. And if we're going to have for-profit organizations getting a subsidized rate, at a minimum, we should expect them to come in twice a year on work days and help maintain the facilities that they're going to be using.
And possibly, possibly Kelly, we could talk about the in-kind segment or portion of the fees structure, which I know we're talking about the policy, but there is an in-kind component of the fee structure, and maybe that's not appropriate to go into much detail about that yet, but that might address some of Mr. Phillips's concerns in terms of groups performing activities on the grounds of the schools in exchange for their use of facilities.
I think that's more of a reason that we ought to have the oversight of the fees.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that we're going to have to go to the action agenda on this item here, and it's going to have to just come before a vote. That's the way I see it, board members, and so we're just going to have to move forward. So I appreciate you being here, Dr. Louder, and bringing this to us. I know it's been a difficult item for you, and it might be what you call a thorn in the flesh, but it's something that we got to work with, and we're working on it. So, but we'll bring it before the board next week, vote on it up or down. It'll be voted on next week, okay? Thank you. All right, board members, we're going to move on to 5.03. We got several more items that we need to be talking about tonight. Time is slowly slipping away. Our next item is 5.03, the school improvement plans. We got Matthew Fail coming to the podium, and he'll be talking a little bit about this. You notice that you've had the direction from the staff to go to Cabarrus K-12, and you can see the school improvement plans, plus Ms. Monroe gave you a disc this evening, I believe, that will have the school improvement plans on it. So anyway, Mr. Fail, if you want to go ahead.
I'm just glad to have the opportunity to present to you the school improvement plans as designed by the schools. These plans were done in collaboration with faculty members. They do require a vote from the faculty members as well as from parents, from their parent PTO groups and parent representatives. These plans also follow a continuous improvement approach that allow the schools to continuously get better and better and allows them to implement their strategies at high levels to increase student performance. I really do applaud the work of the schools. They put a lot of effort and energy into these plans and did a really, really nice job getting these together for your approval today, and hope that you'll support all of their hard work with your approval as well. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Fail. Board members, we have any questions reference school improvement plans? We'll start on Mr. Phillips' side.
No, I don't have any questions. I read through a random sample of the plans last weekend. Looks like a lot of work went into them, and I particularly wanted to applaud the school improvement plan from Concord Middle School. I think Principal Susan Owens and her team did an exemplary job. I like the format. She has the key goals right up there at the front, it's written in language that a non-educator can understand, and the key goals are, targeted to things that are clearly important. We want the kids to learn more, we want them to be well-behaved, and we want them to be absent less frequently, and I think those are really laudable goals, so well done.
Wonderful. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. I also want to point out something on your CDs that you received today. You received on there's a file that's called Goal Summary. It will allow you to have a quick glance at the strategies and goals for all of the schools. So if that provides you with some assistance from this Monday to next Monday.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Harrison?
Just hallelujah for parents and community activists and teachers, all working together as they must have done diligently all summer long to produce their individual plans. I have to commend you tell me how many hundreds of not just faculty and staff and employees of the school system, but parents who were involved in each school's plan, and that's just a great indication of their passion for the schools as well. It will take us a while to go through the sheer quantity because of, if I understand correctly, the state is requiring us to maybe meticulously go through and approve either each school improvement plan or as a block. I'm not sure how we'll proceed with that, but it'll take us a while to go through and get a grasp individually of the details of each school improvement plan.
Two things. You have time till next Monday, of course, and we can approve them as a block. We don't have to approve each individual plan. You can put them kind of like you do a clump of action items and say we're going to approve the plans or not. Also, remember that goal summary will help you digest a lot of that information. It contains a lot of the critical components relative to the school's goals and the strategy, which is probably some of the most important high-level information that you need. Each plan also has detailed action steps for how they plan to achieve, but those only go out to a quarter. And then at the end of every quarter, they go through a check-act cycle where they're looking at the data that they've collected for that quarter and making decisions around what's working, what's not working, and tweaking it. So it's a living, breathing document. It's not stagnant.
And can you go over the state's new policies or items that the state legislature implemented this summer for school boards to proceed? If you can give us kind of a high level of that very quickly.
Well, I'll give you the high-level change. The only change from previous years to this year is that if you were looking at specific school safety plans, then anything that addressed a particular process that a school might take, for example, to evacuate the building, or if they were going to do a lockdown procedure, any of those specific procedures, you would have the right to look at in closed session. You would not have to discuss them in open session. However, our district, much like many districts across the state, schools adopt the district's safety plan, and that's documented on the assurances page. We don't submit each individual safety plan.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Walter?
Yeah, it's obvious a lot of hard work went into putting these together, and I commend those folks that taking the time to go through that. My issue is basically to make sure everything was consistent, had a consistent look, and was completed with the signatures and everything dotted and I's T's. And you're telling me that that'll be done by Monday, so I'm satisfied. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Mr. Geiger?
I think statutorily we're a thumbs up or thumbs down, and I'm a thumbs up. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Geiger. Ms. Carpenter?
I want to say the same thing. You did a wonderful job in all the schools I've gone through. A lot of them, and they have all done a wonderful job. And it's amazing to look at the different ones, how different they are. Some go towards technology, some go towards one area, and they are different. And to thank the parents, thank the staff. You can see the time that's gone in it. I just want to thank everyone for all the time and energy they've put into it, and they've done a wonderful job, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Shoemaker?
Well, I don't need to tell you, but thank you. But one of the things I wonder is, after we have approved these plans, how are they used? Because, I mean, these are very comprehensive documents, and, trying to follow them through and utilize them in your day-to-day, what process do you use to follow these plans to make sure that you're actually not just putting words on a paper and putting graphs on there and making it all pretty, but yeah, I heard you smiling. But how do we actually use it? What's the format that you use to make these things come alive?
All right. So as I mentioned before, it's a continuous improvement process that they put in place, and we use what's called the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, or for short, PDCA. Each of the schools receive coaching and support throughout the year, and it's cyclical. So we began the process, even though it's cyclical, we began in the summer, so to speak. And during the summer, each school came to ACN, which was wonderful to allow us to use their facility. It was a great facility to use, and they were very responsive to our needs. It was very nice. But in any case, during that time, they received 2 days of coaching and support, and I used that term very carefully because it was not stand and deliver professional development so much as an opportunity for them to work. And so they were given a little bit of coaching and more time to work, a little bit of coaching, more time to work for each of the components of the plan. After that time, and part of that work was comprehensive needs assessment, and then having some real good conversations around what's a SMART goal, what's it need to look like, and beginning to get those things down on paper. They go back into their schools, and then they work with their faculty, staff, parents, etc., to get buy-in, support, tweak the ideas that they had over the summer, and finalize the first part of the Plan Do. And then those, of course, are submitted for your approval and adopted, and they begin the work. And I should say they've begun that work, so I can hope they're not waiting till October to start working on their strategies. But hopefully they can continue in that direction and keep that strong work going. Then every quarter there's a different element of support. So at the end of the first quarter, myself and the curriculum instruction directors go out to the schools, and we meet with school leadership. And by that I don't mean just the principal. We'll meet with goal team chairs, we'll meet with as well as the school administration, whoever they invite, and we discuss where they are with the plan, because each quarter they go through the Check Act cycle. So at the end of every quarter, they have established what are called goal teams. Each goal team is essentially over a strategy. So if they have a strategy in the plan to do the one-to-one initiative, for example, which we have a couple schools doing, then they have a goal team whose responsibility is to implement that strategy. And that team meets monthly. And during those monthly meetings, this plan is living and breathing. They can adjust steps in the plan in the middle of October. They don't have to wait to the end of the quarter. They can do it in August. They can do it in November. But at the end of every quarter, they formally go through the Check Act cycle, where they're looking at their data, and there's 3 types of data they're expected to collect: completion, fidelity, and impact, to help them really get a good sense of how that strategy is being implemented. And they identify the strengths, the gaps, and they figure out what's working, what's not working, what do we have to tweak, and then they write the plan for the next quarter. At mid-year, those who do the principal evaluations have a conversation about the school improvement planning process with the principal at that point in time. And then at third quarter, there's also a coaching cycle for basically those goal team chairs and school leadership, so that they can have that one-on-one dialogue around fidelity to the process and what they need to do to get stronger in their implementation. And then we begin again over the summer.
One other question. I don't mean to drag this out, but I really wanted to understand. And the professional learning communities are part of some of these goal teams, and this filters down to those groups so that each community is professional learning community, your PLC communities. They're integrated into this process. Is that true?
Yes. Well, and it depends on the strategy, of course. But if the strategy is related directly to curriculum instruction, then definitely there's an integrated component. So you have your school improvement team, which is, think of it somewhat like a governing body, if you will. Their responsibility is to sometimes troubleshoot issues that are going on throughout the school, whether it's relative to the school improvement plan or not, as well as ensure that the resources of the school are being carefully organized and orchestrated in such a way, because you may get a goal team who's implementing one-to-one and a goal team who's implementing Reader's Workshop, and they both want to provide professional development on the same day. So school improvement team helps monitor that and communicates. Someone from each of the goal teams is expected to be on the school improvement team. So you've got that two-way communication. Goal teams are made up of faculty members from the school, and those same people are members of PLC. It's just a different role. The goal teams organized cross-functional so that you have members from different grade levels or from different subject areas depending on whether you're talking elementary, middle, or high, and their responsibility for implementing the strategy at the school level. They can communicate down to a PLC, for example, if they want the PLC to try a particular strategy and see how that's looking in common formative assessments and that kind of thing. And then the PLC would have those kinds of conversations around the strategy they're working with directly with students and how that's impacting student performance with their individual students. The goal team, they're looking at aggregate level information. How's second grade doing? How's third grade doing?
Thanks. I appreciate you sharing the linkage, and that sounds like a very comprehensive process to help keep our schools moving forward and keeping the students acclimated and the teachers trying to figure out how to best help them to learn and achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker, for your comments. Dr. Shepard, you had some comments that you wanted to bring out.
Well, Matthew did a wonderful job of going through the process, and I want to just add a few things to that. One, you hear a lot of discussion about whether schools are accountable or not. I think the process that you're reviewing, the school improvement planning process, and it is more than just a written plan that's placed on the shelf. It is a continuous improvement process, and that's what Matthew's expertise is, and that's why we brought him here to help us with this process. But I think it's one of the higher forms of accountability. I think this and parental accountability, what parents think in terms of customers of our school is some of the most important work. To me, it's not all about a test score, but it's about all the work that teachers do every day with their students. There's another piece that the state doesn't require that you approve, but the people that sit before you, a lot of them are not here tonight, but each of them and the directors that work with them put together department improvement plans. And so that is there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that we're also working to continuously improve. I'm very proud of the work that goes on in there. It's not the most popular work we do. We love working with people. We love working with children. And when we stop and begin to quantify our work and try to set goals, and it's not why we went to school, but it is our part of the work that makes us accountable to the taxpayers and to the citizens. And so I compliment the schools and your work, Matthew, in getting the school improvement plans presented to our board tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shepard, and thank you, Matthew, also, and all of the parents, and everybody's done thanked everybody, and I join that, so, because I know there's a ton of work involved, and I, with all the schools we have, and they each got their own plan, it's probably up into the hundreds and hundreds of people involved, and I really appreciate them taking their time and being involved. What's the pleasure of the board? Consent or action? Consent. Everybody good with consent? Okay, Matthew, it's consent. Okay. Thank you very much. Board members, we'll move along to 5.04. We'll have the extension of the lawn mowing contracts presentation, and we've got Dave Burnett here in Mr. Wicky's absence. And so, Dave, when you get ready, we'll move forward.
I'm ready. The request is for extending contracts to all the firms that provide lawn mowing services to the district schools. The total amount of that, of all the contracts, would be $537,824. The budget source is the grounds operating funds. And there was some questions that were posed via email, which we've answered, and hopefully you all have received those. And if there's any questions that we can add to that, we'd be happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. I only have just one real quick question of the amount that you just mentioned, the 530-some thousand, whatever it is. I noticed a footnote here with facilities and maintenance has the 77,000 for Kannapolis. Is that part of that? Do we have to give that to them, or is that taken out of that 532,000?
You would have to.
You see what I'm talking about on the attachment?
Yeah.
At the bottom. In other words, it says currently allocate 77,000 for Kannapolis City Schools. I remember.
That includes the 77,000.
So we have to send that to them each year then. I mean, I know we sent it to them last year because they decided they wanted to do their own maintenance on their own. And so I remember that. So this is the total allocation, and it does include this.
Yes.
That was just for clarity for the rest of the board members.
Yes.
All right, board members, do you have any questions? We'll start on Mr. Phillips' side. Mr. Harrison. Mr. Walter.
According to that email, you've got Northwest has got 5 schools. Yeah, that's the lowest amount, or almost the lowest amount. Why is that?
Acreage, I can tell you the various acreages of all the different districts.
Okay.
That's probably it.
Plus, they're right there all together, and so they
Okay.
hadn't got to travel near as far as whereas some of them do.
Well, if he thinks this is the best deal we're going to get, then that's fine with me.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Mr. Kiger. Ms. Carpenter. No questions? Okay, Mr. Shoemaker.
And you don't have to provide it tonight, but could you provide me all the different fields that we actually do? Because I know that it seems to me that there's more than just the actual school sites that we do. I got the impression from one of our earlier meetings that there were more sites that we're doing, say like the Hartsel Field and some other types of sites that are involved in the acreage that don't just include our campus acreages.
I'd be happy to provide that and to help address the question. We do some parks and rec fields. The Cox Mill Park is one example.
Yeah, I think this board is really not clear as to exactly what the scope of work that your lawn maintenance folks actually provide. And in that discussion, I was kind of shocked to realize that there were actually more fields and more things that we actually do for the county. It does affect the acreage, and I'd like to get what the acreage is on those, because I'd calculated our campus acreages, but I haven't calculated those acreages, and so that would definitely affect our costs.
We have the acreages, and I can provide you an email in the morning.
Great. And these costs, you said the current annual costs, and so these costs that we see here will continue on for the next 2 years, exactly at this, and these were the same costs that we've had for the past 3 years?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Based on the mowing cycle cost.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Is everybody good with the consent agenda for the mowing contracts? Everybody okay? Yes. Okay, that's how we'll do that, Dave. Thank you very much for bringing that to us. You're going to get to stay there for the next item. This item could require a little bit of lengthy discussion, 5.05, the potential bond referendum prioritization. And Mr. Burnett, if you want to go ahead on that.
Sure. An electronic survey was distributed to all the board members. All the board members participated, and all board members answered every question. The results of the survey prioritized the proposed bond referendum. And that order is the new school due to growth, Mount Pleasant Middle School replacement, new school due to replacing an older elementary school, roof work, security vestibules, Central Cabarrus High School, which was master planning, design, and a phase 1 of an addition project. J.N. Freeze Magnet and Performance Learning Center, relocate the PLC, and system-wide pavement repairs, replacement, and improvements. That was the order that the board came up with through the survey process.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. And I want to also remind the board, whether the board knows or whether the board doesn't know, I know Mr. Kiger does because he's obviously our vice chair, but we're going to be meeting with the county commission along with Kannapolis City Schools, Rowan Community College, and then the county personnel as well on this coming Thursday. And it'll be a mini retreat where that we'll be talking about some of these issues for each of these entities. And of course, this will be what Cabarrus County Schools brings to the county as our recommendation for these particular items to be on any bond referendum that we might be able to have for 2014, November 2014. So, I think that this does require some thoughtful process, but keeping in mind, though, this is a draft, and we can change it around as we see fit. But we've got to act on this pretty quick, though, and I think that they're looking for us to give them some kind of an answer on Thursday, I believe. Is that right, Dr. Shepherd?
It is.
And so we really got to decide on our priority list, and just for whatever it's worth, the top three items is, like $71,000, and the bond referendum's only supposed to be somewhere in the range of $100 million. I said 70 million, 71 million. But the proposed bond referendum would be somewhere only around $100 million. So you can see with Cabarrus County Schools, our top three priorities is 70% of the total bond, when there's total 4 entities vying for this money. So with that being said, I'd like to open the floor for discussion. We'll start on Mr. Shoemaker's side, and we'll just come around the board, and if you feel we need to discuss it a second round, we can do that. But I'd like to ask each board member to refrain from speaking until everybody's had a chance to speak at least once. Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker.
Well, as you can see on this list, we've got about $101 million worth of needs listed here. I want the public to understand that that's not nearly where we should be. It's about $150 to $180 million shy of what the real needs are in this county, and we've got a long way to go. This was just a Band-Aid to get us over the hump, but we really need more money to fix our schools and to pay the appropriate attention to our facilities as they age out on us. And yes, we have new schools, but we also have a lot of aging facilities, and some facilities in this county are over 75 years old and are requiring a tremendous amount of maintenance. I think that we've well placed the fact that we know we have growth in this county, and that we've got the three schools listed first, and it's nice to see that we have a consensus from the board in that regard. But you see that the fourth item down is roofs, or roofs, whatever way you want to pronounce that. But we have a huge need for roof replacement, and it is, again, something that we need to find a different way of handling rather than having to put them in the bond. We need to be able to allocate money on a certain timetable to be repairing roofs on a normal schedule rather than having to go this route. And so, this is something that we'll have to work with the county on to make sure that in the future we don't end up like this 15 years from now, and we're talking to the taxpayer about these same roofs because we didn't either get the type of warranties we needed to or whatever. But it's a long way away, and you should be saving after you replace. You should be saving money every year to be ready for this. That's all I'll say at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Are you okay with the prioritized list the way that it is? I mean, you're okay with those three? Okay, Ms. Carpenter.
Well, I have to agree with Barry on one aspect. I do not think it is prudent to put roofs onto a bond referendum. Repairs. That is not a very prudent way you don't want to finance repairs on a bond referendum. That's not very prudent. And if I was putting something ahead of something, I would put the vestibules, which is security, which is a permanent fixture. I would say maybe put that one step up, because that is a permanent fixture. And I would say maybe put that one step up, because that is something that's permanent and a permanent structure. And I would say security is always a top thing with me. One of the other things that I would see too, when you go with the construction of replacement elementary, there again, we could see something that could be maybe a lower amount there if we're looking at, I know a lot of us have talked about Royal Oaks, and that's a smaller type school. And you're looking at $20 million there. And if we look at a smaller type school, and we could do on that school, possibly could be done like we did when we built, and I've just lost train of thought. When we built, somebody help me. No, not Boger. When we built, when we built on site, we had the school in front and the one in back. Weinkauf. You know how we did that? You weren't here. No, you were not here. So you wouldn't remember that one. But we built that school. They had the school in front and we built it in back. And so what I'm saying, use that same type thing. And look at some of the existing buildings. Not all those buildings are old. And see what we can actually reuse. So what I'm saying, that cost could be less. So use that concept, because Royal Oaks is one that has been on the books, and we've talked about that. And what I'm saying, we may can come up with a lower cost. We may can reutilize some of those to come in with a lower cost, because we all know, as we mentioned, we don't know. We know those first two things are our top priorities, and I'm saying come in with a lower figure. The other thing that has been, and we talk about replacement of Mount Pleasant. Also, this has been, and I think that maybe Lynn was going to talk about this, but our board had talked about doing it on the current site, so we wouldn't have to buy land. And is the 31,000, are we talking about replacing it on current site, or do you know?
Well, that's really a decision that needs to be made, really in concert with.
But is 31,000, is that what that amount, I mean, 31 million, 31,000, 31, yeah, I wish, is 31 million, where's that total coming from?
That's expecting to acquire a site.
So we could come in less than that if we use current site, and with replacing Mount Pleasant, which that was the middle school, which would be in the next middle school. I know our board, not this board, the board prior to that, had made a motion to use that current site, and there had been drawings to say that. And we had asked about trying to keep the auditorium there. I know that discussion had been talked about at one time. And to the same thing, build on existing site. And that's one of the things, again, trying to keep those costs down. And if we keep that cost down, the other costs down, again, that would maybe save us some money with that, and maybe would make these things where we could get all three of these things done. And again, I would like to see I can't say that word again. I would like to see those moved up. And again, if we did that, maybe we would be able to move some of these other things up.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Kiger.
Well, just one point of clarification from Ms. Carpenter. It wasn't the previous board. It was the one prior to that, because I wasn't here when the discussion about Mount Pleasant Middle took place. So it was two boards ago. But as far as the list goes, we had a pretty good discussion about this in our subcommittee meeting. There's a lot of different ways we can go. I'm okay with the list as it's presented. I mean, realistically, we know we're not getting to the bottom of the list if they do the bond, if the bond passes, if the commissioners decide to do it, whatever the case may be. And we know, as Mr. Shoemaker said, our real list goes well beyond what we're seeing here. I mean, it goes well beyond that. But to give them something that they're asking for to bring to the table, I think we've certainly the first three items are an absolute must. We know, we saw the ORED, we spent money to get the data to show exactly what's going on. We know we need a new elementary school. We knew it before ORED came. We know it even more now. I think that without question, Mount Pleasant Middle School needs to be replaced. The site part, I guess I'm somewhat indifferent to that. I know what the two boards ago went through, and that was pretty vocal. A fight, Mr. Chairman says. I've had other people tell me and stop me that said, hey, we felt like that we didn't get the school because of the fight, and we would rather have a school and not be on the site we want than to not get a school. Well, I'd like to figure out what the best thing is to do for the school, for the community out there. It doesn't really matter to me which way we go. They just need a school. That school it needs to be replaced. It's past time. At some point in time, having that open air design was fantastic. You walk around, you go out of your classroom, and you walk down and you go, and that would have been great. And it also would be great if we could get on an airplane in less than 3 hours too. Well, those days are gone. We have to now design them one way in, one way out, the vestibule and all that. And that school is just outdated and it's not safe. And we need to do something about it. So, as far as the roofs are critical. I guess you could probably have a long conversation of whether that's bond worthy or not. To me, we got to do it. We've got to do it. I think it's worth having on the list, whether it's in front or not with the vestibules. I'm okay with the list as we have it. So that's a long way of basically giving the same thumbs up that I gave earlier for the list that we currently have.
Thank you, Mr. Kiger. Mr. Walter.
I can understand, I mean, we had the report where we've got growth. How many seats are we adding with this new school, or do we want to add with the new?
Again, we'd have to complete the programming phase.
But we've got a construction estimate, so
I think the anticipation for the new elementary school at Growth was 1,000 students.
1,000 students. So the one below that would be another 1,000 students.
Yes.
But that's a replacement of an older. Right. So we're here and we're looking. We have a study that tells us we're going to have 6,000 to 8,000 students coming into our system in the next 10 years, and we're planning for 1,000, and we're spending the rest of this on replacement, which really need to be done. I agree. I certainly agree there, but I think we need to address the growth that's in our community. We're going to be overwhelmed.
As Mr.
And I guess, I don't know, about 2008, you all, there was a Cabarrus County Schools 15-year facilities plan. Are you familiar with that at all? I just looked it up, and there was an article on all those projects. And we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects, if not more than that, projects that should have been built by now that haven't been. Most of those are adding capacity. So I just think we need to focus on some capacity issues as well before you get down to again, with roofs. The lifespan of a roof is not as long as a school. I think if you're going to make a bond issue and you want something that's going to be there permanently. So I'm kind of opposed to putting roof replacements on this list. We had folks come to us, we've only been here on this board for a little less than a year, but we've had people come to us about Wolf Meadow in bad shape, Royal Oaks in bad shape, Culture and Webb that was desperately needing some improvements made to it. They're not on this list. I think at least we ought to put those on this list and let the commissioners pick and choose if that's whatever fits at that point. But I think it needs to be on there, at least highlighted to it. Okay, those are my initial comments. I'm sure we'll...
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Mr. Harrison.
And again, thank you for compiling all of our views and opinions and crunching them into this format is helpful, very helpful to me. As Mr. Walter and Mr. Kiger and others kind of already touched on, certainly Thursday and in future discussions with the county commissioners about the prospects of a bond referendum. Obviously, we need to coordinate the ORAD study, our whole, arsenal, if you will, of data and facts and figures that we know about our needs, and to prioritize those needs. And for better or for worse, here's the way I look at something like this. In my mind, in the future, in months or years that I might be reviewing this kind of thing, I'm going to be thinking, is what we're doing one of these priorities? So I guess I have to have in my mind that our first priority is going to be a new school for growth, and our second priority is likely to be the Mount Pleasant replacement, and as we've set them up here. I hope we can stick to these priorities as we go forward and not have some situations where things that we identified now, fall off the listing. I hope we can very consistently pursue this list or a version of this list that identifies these needs and sticks with them going forward. So I just, again, commend you for the work on this so far, but I hope we will stick to this prioritization as we've identified it and as we can back it up with data like the ORAD report. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Phillips?
Thank you. Well, I believe that when I did my voting that the top three were my top three, so I'm glad to see that there's a uniform thinking across the board on that. But one thing that I want everyone to realize is that if you don't see your school or your particular project on here, it's not that we didn't consider that a top priority. These are the 8 that the administration gave the school board to rank. And so there are other needs out there, as Barry indicated, and I wish that we could address those as well. And so along those lines, one of the things I think that's missing right now is a long-term strategic plan so that the community can see, okay, this is step one, and here's how the next steps follow beyond that. And just as an example, I am hoping that this replacement elementary school will be significantly larger than the one that it replaces. And the reason for that, and if it indeed is 1,000, let's just assume it's going to be 1,000, then the other schools that we have that are older are in the more 300, 400, 500 range. So that means we will have a lot of extra seats. And that gives us surge capacity to then empty out one of the other older schools, knock that building down, and build a replacement. That's what we lack right now, is we have nowhere to put these children to go in and we don't even have to knock it down at that point. We could actually go in and renovate, which could be a lot cheaper than knocking down and building a replacement school. So what I really encourage I guess Dr. Shepard to do is to initiate a long-term strategic plan committee so that we can show the community, here's how this is the first step in addressing all of the issues. The second thing is that in these cases where we have replacement projects, please include in the budget the money to demolish the old buildings. I do not want to be responsible for yet another abandoned building in this county that is owned by the school district. I drive past the old Odell School enough, and I shake my head every time I see those tattered buildings that are an eyesore to the community, and we should be ashamed that we are that kind of landlord. So please include money for demolition of the replaced buildings, or of the buildings we're replacing. And then finally on the Mount Pleasant Middle School, I kind of feel that the location should be up to the community. And I wonder who on are you the liaison? So perhaps you can get a sense from the community leaders, Rob, as to which they prefer it. I would say, as long as the cost is not significantly different from one location to another, then let's go with what they would prefer.
I think the preference would be to keep it close to where it's at.
So I guess that would be the first thing then to work toward. But I did have one question on that. So it says a replacement school for 900 students. The current capacity is 750, and most of our other middle schools that have been built recently are in the 1,100 range. And so is there any advantage to just taking one of the existing designs and saying, well, let's redo that? Or another way to ask the question is, how did you come up with 900 as the capacity?
to answer the question, the Mount Pleasant community isn't projected to have any significant growth. The current enrollment is less than 900 students. When you look at middle schools through grades, if you look at 300 students per grade, that's a nice breakdown for that grade structure. That's probably the most significant reasons.
Well, I can just see where somebody that's going to question this whole bond will say, well, wait a minute. You've got a school that currently, I think the current enrollment is around 650, and you're building it for 900, and you're telling me that you're not anticipating any growth out in that area. We need a better explanation than that 900 seemed like a nice round number.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. And since I was on the board in 2007 and 8 and all that, when we discussed the Mount Pleasant Middle School the last time, the board did take action on it as far as the location was concerned. But now whether this board elects to carry on with that, that's a whole new topic of discussion at some point. But, there's been some valid points made by all of the board members tonight, and I commend you for that and taking the survey and putting them in prioritized list. And I just want to talk primarily about the top three, because keeping in mind there's no need to talk about something that's probably not going to happen, and that's the items below that. And it's a known fact that with Cox Mill being like it is, there's going to have to be another elementary somewhere in that area. The Cox Mill Elementary School, Boger seems to be okay right now. Odell is going to be in the red, if not already in the red. I can't remember where they are exactly. Let's see, Odell. Actually, they're in the red already with a capacity of 946, and they got 1,040. So you got Odell and Cox Mill that's definitely over capacity, and they're in trouble already. So the elementary school in that area, there's no doubt. And even the commissioners realize that, because they've given us $1.5 million to buy some land, which is an issue that we really need to get busy on finding some land for that school, number one. All right, the middle school, and like I said a while ago, since I was on the board when we talked about that, made the decision to leave it at the current site. And I think, Ms. Carpenter, you was on the board at that time as well. And so anyway, I think the comment that Mr. Phillips made about the capacity of the school, that needs to be looked into. What I would recommend, based on what we have, based on the study that we did with ORED, that whereas right now the school capacity, the Mount Pleasant Middle School capacity is 754, we got 670 there, somewhere thereabouts, and the projected growth for the next 10 years will put them at 675. So you're looking at a potential 5 student growth in the next 10 years, and it don't make any sense to me to put a school for 900 when you're not expecting to have more than 700. So what I would say is that we would need to compromise on that figure and reduce the scope of the school to an 800 capacity, somewhere thereabouts, and maybe even 700 with a design, which we've talked about that in the past, about how that the school would be located on North Main Street, running parallel with North Main, and then of course the town of Mount Pleasant would close North Drive, and I think they gave us a pretty much thumbs up before when we talked about it, that they would close North Drive at the Cabarrus County Schools property line and make that all one big piece of property there. But reducing the scope, putting the building on the current site, we could probably reduce that. But what I was going to say is we could maybe build it for 700 with the ability to add another 100 seats at some point on one end of the building there on North Drive, on North Main Street, if that's what the board does. But my goal as your board chair is to see to it that we get school construction back underway again, because we've got to meet, as Mr. Walters said, the seating capacity is predicted to be somewhere 6,000 to 7,000 additional children in the next 10 years, and we haven't built any schools in 5 years, 6 years now. And so even if we got the okay, it's a multi-process. Even if we get the okay from the commissioners, after we got all the pieces of the puzzle put together, and we make our presentation, and the other entities make their presentation, and then we can somehow or another convince the commissioners that we need a bond referendum in November of 2014, that's the first obstacle. And then the second obstacle is getting the money and then actually starting the design and the build out. So we're looking at a minimum 2016 to get a school opened if we started on it, which we already working on the bond referendum. But anyway, that's where we are on that part. So I'm good with obviously the first priority, the second priority, and the third priority here, the additional new school. That would address some of the concerns that we've had from parents at Royal Oaks. And that will also possibly address the concerns of, if you look at your ORED study, board members, where that Weinkauf, which is not even probably a rock's throw from Royal Oaks, they are already almost in the red. The capacity of Weinkauf is 880. They're at 843, and they're projected to be in the red zone here before too awful many years. And so we'll have to address the growth at Weinkauf as well as Royal Oaks. And I think that Ms. Carpenter had some very valid comments about if there's a way to put the school on the same Royal Oaks property, then we won't have to do a lot of redistricting and all those kind of things that's involved. So that's sort of my thoughts for whatever it's worth, but I'm good with the three top priorities there. These other things, I could say things about all of them. And I could comment maybe on Central Cabarrus, because that was a topic today at the commission, as you know, and they were asking us why we were talking about replacing the school, and then on the other hand wanting to put artificial turf out there, and here we are asking them to consider building a new school at some point, but spend all this money on the turf, which that's going to be discussed in more detail at some point in the next 5 or 6 weeks. But it's from my own self, just from my own opinion, and I'm just one. We got 6 others and a lot of guidance that we need on this, but I truthfully, honestly, I just don't see Central being replaced anytime soon, and in all honesty, it shouldn't even be on here. I mean, I helped place it on here just like everybody else did, but I think it was my last item though, because I think Chairman Poole of the commission, she made a comment that I think was very fitting, and she said that Central just needs a lot of tender love and care. And it might take $4, $5, $6 million, and I'd rather see us spend $4, $5, $6 million on a school than to spend $47 million for a new one. And then all the logistics problems of land and the students in between, and where would you put it, and all those different things, when we can probably somehow or another, some way, work with the commission and get $4 or $5 million to apply to Central to make it give us 20 more years possibly. And that's my thoughts. And with that, Dr. Shepard wants to say a few things. And I apologize for taking so long, but let me get his comments, and then we're going to move to the cameraman because they need to change the disc. Say, Dr. Shepard.
I just want to say that I'm encouraged by what I hear from our county government, that they're considering the opportunity to allow our citizens in this county make some decisions about how to improve the facilities in our school system. I don't need to repeat a lot of the things you've already heard, but if you just look on your way around town, you see dirt turned everywhere. People are moving here, and growth is a concern once again. And we've got to build schools to address that growth. I had hoped in the meantime, before the Great Recession came, that while we were not so much in a period of growth, that we could get some of our older schools replaced. Well, those schools that need to be replaced a number of years ago just are in greater need of replacement now. And so you reviewed that list. This list that you have before you tonight is your prioritizing of the items that your construction committee put together. You have 2 board representatives on that committee that have had input as to what the total list was. It wasn't just the administration putting out 7 or 8 ideas and asking you to prioritize. It was a much larger list, and there was board representation on that. I want to make sure we're clear on that. But at the same time, other school systems, other entities in our communities have needs, and I think it's going to be very important that we weigh the needs of our school system with that of Kannapolis City and that of Rowan and Cabarrus Community College and the needs that our county has. And I think it's an exciting time when we're going to ask our voters possibly to get involved with making some decisions about exactly what happens in our community. And I want to applaud our commissioners and encourage them to stay on that path.
Thank you, Dr. Shepard. I appreciate your comments. And once again, board members, I appreciate all your comments and everything. However, it's come down to where we need to at least agree on something tonight, because we're going to be talking to the commissioners on Thursday. And, we've got to at least give them, Dr. Shepard, are they looking for a draft, or are they looking for a final tally from us?
I think we can present it as a draft with a final decision being made next Monday night. But clearly, if the board could give us some indication, particularly with the first three items, if we're in the right ballpark with those, which I hope we are because we've had a lot of input on that, it would be helpful.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was hoping that our board can give us consensus on the top three items. I think we all agree that the top three items need to be done. And keep in mind, that's $71 million. As I said earlier, 70% of the total bond. And I think that we can probably maybe do a little bit better as far as scaling that back, particularly if we do Mount Pleasant Middle at a smaller school. So we can cut it back a little bit. And then I guess there might be some additional funds from the county. They might be some additional funds from the county where they can help us pay cash maybe for one of these elementaries, or at least appropriate some of the money that might be available now to help us on that as well. So tell me what the board pleasure is. What's your pleasure? Are you okay with the top three items, that we can go ahead and present that to the commission on Thursday, and then we can look at the other items, and we'll put it on the action agenda, but we need to let them know, though, that it's the consensus of the board that the top three items is what we would like to put on the bond. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. So that's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and put the top three items on the consent agenda, and then the other three items here, the other items on there, we can discuss that and reprioritize that if you think we need to. So is that what you're looking for us to try to do, David?
When we left the meeting the first time with the other entities, the charge was to everybody bring your bond list.
Right.
Unfortunately, that meeting's going to happen prior to our business meeting, so it's kind of like tonight's the night we get to do our list. I just hate to cut anything off our list. I just know I used to call my parents and tell them my books at school were $300. Well, maybe they were really $280, so I could squeeze an extra 20 out of it. You ask for a little more than you think you're going to get. So I just hate to cut back on we know we're not getting $101 million. But I just think let's give them here's our bond list. Let's give them the list and let that group figure out what they want to do with it.
Well, I can go along with that.
And I believe the finance director for the county is expecting this list tomorrow. Yes, that's right.
Well, I can live with that, no problem. Is everybody else okay with doing it like that?
I still don't think you should put the roof replacement or the Central Cabarrus on there. At this time, I think you ought to consider some of the smaller schools. And then the other option that Ms. Minot had brought to our attention about possible restoration of the old Concord High School and use that as a way to move these students when you renovate other schools.
I think she called that surge, I believe she said. Well, that leaves me in a dilemma. I want to, obviously we got to make a decision. And so it might be that, like I said in the beginning,